What's up guys? You know what time it is. It is time for me to film this video for the 18th time. Is this good? No, but I'm sure you're probably watching this from some sort of office space or maybe even a home office, or if you're like me, just vibing on the toilet. I am currently making this video from my home office, which also happens to be my kitchen. Of course, for me at least, it has not always been like this. In 2019, I was doing your classic commute 5 days a week, doing the 9 to 5 to a office space. Now, my commute looks a little something like this. On my end, my personal home office has gone through some iterations, and recently it's had its biggest iteration, and it's finally at a place that I'm decently happy with. Obviously, it's in a kitchen, so it's got some compromises, but right now it really feels as good as it's kind of gonna get in this space. This new format of office and the home office has really gotten me thinking about what offices were like in the past, and I kind of want to look at where they've been, the kind of iterations that they've gone through, and then I kind of want to lay down some commentary about what I think they're going to look like in the future. The home office has definitely gone mainstream, and it is here to stay, unlike the workout regimen that I set for myself. Anyways, let's take a look at some of the popular office layouts of the past. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll get started on this presentation. The first estimated office was likely developed around the 18th century, where global trade and an increase in logistical affairs and operations popped in. Layouts of the time were not too complicated. A UK government report basically summarized them as being the basic separation of mechanical work being out in the open with other people doing similar tasks, and workers working with their head giving their own space in order to not be interrupted. With more office jobs coming up, more offices obviously had to follow, and organizations decided to put a little extra thought into it. Emphasis on a little. These offices were conceptualized by mechanical engineer Frederick Taylor. Inspired by factory assembly lines, it was basically a bunch of desks just tightly packed together in rows to maximize space and efficiency. Managers would be positioned on the outside of the ground floor to watch, monitor their teams, and crack some sort of whip, probably, I don't know. Taylorism was widely criticized for its lack of human consideration at the time, and it wouldn't be long before designers thought, let's just do the same thing, but a little more intentional, and like maybe put a couch in there. And that's what we have as the open office plan. The open office is pretty self-explanatory. It's an open ground floor with desks and furniture intentionally laid out around that space. For me, Frank Lloyd Wright's 1939 office at the Johnson Wax Company was sort of the standout in terms of the peak of office design layouts in the open plan concept. The office had a good blend of efficiency and comfort, featuring over 200 sales staff on one floor, but also provided ample space for individual desks, along with bright and natural ceiling lighting and cork ceilings for sound control. I'm sure all of us have been in an open office at one point of our lives, and I think we can all sort of agree that they can be a little loud, chaotic, and distracting. I mean, you got Brad from sales who just always needs to take his calls on speakerphone, and then, you know, you got Kathy who's bringing fish to lunch every day and eating at her desk, and it's just like, Bürolanschaft was the next iteration of the open plan concept. Popularized out of Germany by Eberhard and Wolfgang Schnell, the concept focused on being a socially democratic layout. The office was still mostly open concept with informal buffers like large plants and functional furniture, and these would be used to create boundaries instead of physical partitions and walls. The arrangement focused on organic movement between teams and was designed to create a strong sense of interaction and engagement between the workers. Desks would be grouped together by workflow and was meant to follow the natural flow of paperwork and the communication process. This layout definitely worked in terms of getting teams together to collaborate and work together, but again, any sort of form of open office is going to have the issues of noise and a little bit of that chaos. The Action Office was similar to Bürgerlandschaft, but would aim to address that chaos with a little bit of extra structure and form. The Action Office featured a mix of rooms, modular walls, and display surfaces to create privacy when needed, and booth-like meeting rooms were created to manage sound. There was still organic motion in the office, with the space being flexible enough to fit the needs of workers for given moments. A decent example of an Action Office would be from the show The Office. The office landscape organized seating based on tasks, so Jim and Dwight, both sales, sat right next to each other. And as you can see in the show, this leads to some very productive work between the two, which really benefits the company. However, without proper planning and thoughtfulness, the desire for privacy was probably taken too far. Partitions got taller, buffers became more prevalent, and privacy became the new priority, which leads to the cubicle. The cubicle was basically your final boss in terms of addressing the loud and chaotic nature of all the open office iterations before it. Created by the brilliant Robert Propst, who at the time worked as a designer for the well-known office furniture design firm Herman Miller, loathed the open office. He described it as a wasteland. It saps vitality, blocks talent, frustrates accomplishment. It is the daily scene of unfulfilled intentions and failed effort. He was probably right. I mean, the open office is still used to this day and still pretty widely criticized, which is why the cubicle probably felt so justified. The cubicle would dominate into the 2000s until the tech industry would do what it does best and disrupt the office space. Utilizing the power and mobility of personal computing through laptops and cell phones, tech offices featured breakout spaces, tech-heavy meeting rooms, and open collaborative spaces. The tech office would also add in comforts from home and fun into the office, like lounging areas, ping pong tables, full kitchens, arcades, cafeterias with food and drink. Basically, they were designed so that you would never have to leave. I visited one of these tech offices once in Seattle, and they had toothbrushes in the bathroom, which kind of implies you'd be sleeping there overnight with some frequency, just grinding away on code, I guess. Fancy offices were very commonly used to entice and retain talent in the ever-growing competitive tech space. Alongside the tech office boom were other spaces like co-working spaces. You might be familiar with WeWork. The difference of these offices were that desks and meeting spaces were rented out, so you didn't have to lock yourself into the long-term leases of a dedicated company office. As mentioned before, as laptops and phones becoming more powerful, one could be just as productive in a remote office or a Starbucks as their desk in the office space. Working at a co-working space meant that while you were developing your app, which translates dog barks to memes, you could also be sitting next to a company trying to revolutionize toilet paper, or even just, Bob, who's repairing watches. The whole concept was that you were able to be next to and collaborate with people that weren't even in the same industry as you. However, meeting up in an indoor space with a bunch of strangers in 2020 had lots of challenges, and even today has its own unique set, which is what kind of brings us here. The home office, in theory, is actually pretty hype. You no longer have to commute and you have all the access to the comforts of your home. However, the psychological and emotional toll of confining people to their homes had unique challenges in the early stages. A study by Microsoft showed that the conventional 9-to-5 started to fade away. In July 2020, the average Teams user is sending 45 more chats per week and 42% more chats per person after hours, with chats per week still on the rise. Since your office is in your home, it is a lot harder to escape the office. Emails, phone calls, and meeting notices could sometimes mean that you hop back on your workstation at 8 p.m. to address some notes or concerns. For some, the workday just sort of dragged on. Your dogs, children, and laundry were now part of your working environment, which made it a little bit harder to ignore, unlike when you were in an office where everything's just sort of out of sight, out of mind. You're in the office in that space. Me personally, working in video production, sometimes there were moments logistically that work was a lot slower. Having to upload and download content to a cloud instead of just having people pop over to your desk with a hard drive or just walking over to review things was challenging. Socialization and office banter were basically confined now to your Teams chats and your Zoom calls, and the home office started to feel like a giant cubicle. However, like I said at the beginning of this, work from home can be pretty awesome. With this new structure, I'm personally able to start and end my day whenever I want, as long as I'm attending all of my meetings and hitting all of my deadlines. It's sort of up to me to set my own schedule and get all of that done. And I think this is a model of work that could be beneficial and something that we'll definitely see in the future. People are diverse and live unique lives and have unique preferences. The conventional 9-to-5 definitely does not accommodate this diversity. The remote work model allows people to live farther away in more affordable areas of their city and avoid a chaotic commute. It also gives people more options in terms of childcare and the schedules of their families. There are definitely issues with working from home for sure. Sometimes people might find it hard to stay motivated, or sometimes the distraction from home can really even prevent you from getting your work done altogether. But there are certain things that just work better at home and some things that are going to work better in the office. This is why I think the hybrid model for offices is the future. Partially working from home and then having a dedicated office space for when you need it. These new office spaces would basically only handle 60 to 80% of staff, knowing that not everyone would be in the office at one given time. I think we're also going to see less emphasis on the personal desk as well, seeing as how you would really only go into the office for niche situations like meetings or big brainstorming sessions. I personally found that it was a lot easier for me to hit flow state in my home office. In my old office, it was an open concept, so it was pretty easy to get distracted by people around me or have other needs that might pop in that weren't my immediate tasks that I was trying to get done. Which is another argument for why offices that utilize this hybrid model could be really useful for creative workers. You know, they would pop in, maybe transfer files, in my case of like transferring video files a couple days a week, and then going home and then just grinding it all out. There is so much to be said about this topic. I've gone through a lot and I've actually had multiple iterations of this video on how deep I want to go into multiple topics. Basically, we should stop. I am of course not an expert on any of this in terms of like work culture or any of those things. I'm just someone who sort of experienced both ends and experienced the transition, and this is just kind of how I'm feeling about it. And it was really interesting for me to do all this research and look into, you know, the past offices and stuff. So what do you think? What is your personal preference for work? Did you like having an old office? Do you like working from home? Do you think the hybrid model could be the future like I do? Make sure to let me know. All right, that's it for me, guys. Peace. Yep, that's my life.